Cowboy saves 7 Apache women from Noose. Then unveils a ruthless land conspiracy. Jacob McAllister rode into the small frontier town just as the sun hung low over the dusty horizon. His horse's hooves kicked up little clouds of dry earth with every step, and the wind carried the faint smell of smoke from a distant fire. Jacob was a tall man, with broad shoulders and a face weathered by years in the desert. He had been traveling for weeks, looking for work on a ranch, but his instincts often led him into trouble before he even noticed it. Today, those instincts told him to pay attention. As he reached the center of the town, he noticed a gathering crowd. People were clustered near the main street, their voices loud but tense, and their faces a mixture of fear and excitement. Becked. At the center of the commotion, he saw something that made his stomach tighten. 7 women were tied to wooden posts. Their hands were bound behind them, and ropes dug into their wrists. Their hair was messy, their faces streaked with dust and tears. They looked terrified, yet there was a quiet strength in their eyes that made Jacob pause. The sheriff, a heavy-set man with a bushy mustache, was preparing to hang them. His expression was hard, almost cruel, as he shouted orders to his deputies. The townspeople watched silently, some nodding in agreement, some shifting uncomfortably. A few children peeked out from behind their mothers, not understanding why this was happening. Jacob's horse whinnied nervously, sensing his rider's tension. Base. Jacob dismounted slowly, keeping his hands away from his gun, showing no threat yet ready for action. He moved closer to the crowd, his eyes scanning every detail. Something felt wrong.
The women didn't behave like criminals. They didn't struggle or resist.
They held themselves with dignity despite their fear. He noticed a man standing off to the side, observing everything carefully. Beth. The man wore fine clothes, unlike the rough shirts and boots most townspeople wore. His expression was calculating, almost pleased at the scene unfolding. Jacob knew this man had something to do with the situation. He had the air of someone who thought he could manipulate the law to get what he wanted. Bait. Jacob walked closer, his boots crunching on the dry dirt. The sheriff noticed him and frowned. "You lost, stranger?" he barked. "I don't think so," Jacob replied calmly. "Pay." "I'm just passing through," the sheriff smirked. "Passing through, huh?"
"Then you won't mind staying out of this. These women are guilty."
"They stole from honest folks." Jacob tilted his head slightly. "Are they? Or are they being blamed for something bigger?" His voice was low, but carried over the murmuring crowd. The sheriff's smile faltered for a moment, and Jacob caught it. There was fear beneath the bravado. He realized the sheriff was not acting entirely on his own. He was being used, just like these women. Jacob's mind raced. If he didn't act, these women would be hanged by sundown. He had no time to argue or reason. He needed a plan. His eyes scanned the area and found the supplies he needed: a loose plank on a nearby fence, a wagon parked too close to the post, and a barrel that could be rolled to create a distraction. He waited for the crowd to be distracted by the sheriff giving orders. Then he acted, with quick, precise movements. He slipped behind the crowd, lifted the plank, and positioned it near the posts. He signaled to the women to stay calm. They looked at him, startled, but something in his gaze told them he was trustworthy. "On my mark," he whispered. The sheriff was shouting now, giving orders to tighten the ropes. "Back!" Jacob took a deep breath. He rolled the barrel loudly toward the posts, creating a sudden clatter that drew the attention of the deputies and the townspeople. The plank fell at the same time, creating a small cloud of dust. In the confusion, Jacob rushed to the first woman and cut the ropes binding her hands. The others followed as he moved quickly from post to post, freeing them one by one. They stumbled at first but regained balance as they realized they were no longer trapped. Jacob led them toward the narrow side street, away from the main square. The crowd erupted in shouts, but by the time anyone reacted, Jacob and the women had vanished round the corner. Rasp. They ran towards the outskirts of town, where the buildings ended and the open desert began. The women were quiet, their eyes wide, still processing the escape. Jacob slowed his pace, letting them catch up. He handed water from his canteen to each of them, noticing the relief that washed over their faces.
"Buh. Who did this to you?" he asked gently. One of the older women spoke first, her voice trembling but firm.
"Bess, a man named Silas. He wants our land. We refused to leave, so he framed us for theft."
"The sheriff. He only followed orders."
Bah. Jacob's jaw tightened. Silas. Bah. Beset desperation the man from the moment he saw him in the crowd. Now he knew the extent of the danger. This was not just about petty theft or frontier justice. It was a carefully planned scheme to steal land and destroy lives. They walked in silence for a while, keeping to the shadows, moving through narrow paths between rocky outcrops. Jacob listened carefully, letting the women speak when they felt ready. He learned their names, their families, and the way they lived. They had been part of the Apache community, proud and resilient, and yet now they were hunted because of greed. Jacob realized that freeing them was only the first step.
If they stayed in town, Silas's men would find them. They needed a safe place, somewhere they could hide and plan their next move.
He thought of an old cave he had once used while tracking cattle. It was far enough from town and had natural cover from the desert's rugged terrain. By dusk, they reached the cave. Jacob checked the entrance for signs of recent activity. Satisfied, he led the women inside. It was small but safe, with enough space for everyone to rest. He started a small fire, careful to keep the smoke low, and handed out food and water. The women sat quietly around the fire, their faces reflecting a mix of fear, relief, and gratitude. Jacob watched them, knowing that trust had to be earned.
"You're safe here for now," he said. "But we can't stay too long."
"There are people who want to see you punished, even if it's not right."
They nodded, understanding the danger that still lurked. One of the women, the eldest, spoke. "We never thought anyone would help us." You risked your life." Jacob shrugged. "I couldn't just stand by, not when innocent people are about to die." As night fell, the wind whispered through the canyon, and the desert seemed to settle around them. Jacob knew that the road ahead would be dangerous. Silas would not give up, and the lawmen in town were likely complicit in the plot. But for now, they had a moment of peace. The women could rest, and Jacob could plan the next step. He looked at their faces in the firelight, seeing courage and determination. He realized that this was more than just a rescue. It was a chance to fight for justice, to expose greed and corruption, and to protect those who could not protect themselves. Jacob leaned back against the cave wall, the stars twinkling above. He knew the desert would be harsh, the townspeople suspicious, and Silas ruthless. But he also knew that one man, with courage and careful planning, could make a difference. Tonight, the women were safe, and tomorrow he would begin the fight to uncover the truth. The wind carried the sound of distant coyotes, and the fire crackled softly. Jacob closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking in the stillness. He was ready. The rescue was only the beginning. The story of greed, deceit, and courage was just beginning to unfold, and he intended to see it through. The cave was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fire Jacob had built. The women huddled together, their eyes wide and wary, still recovering from the fear of the day. They were exhausted, hungry, and shaken, but the knowledge that they were free, at least for now, gave them a spark of hope. Jacob handed out small pieces of bread and sips of water, speaking gently to ease their tension. "My name is Jacob," he said simply. "I am not here to hurt you. I only want to help." One of the women, the eldest, nodded slowly. Her face was lined with years of hardship, but her eyes held sharp intelligence. "I am Naeli," she said. "These are my sisters. We don't know who to trust anymore." Jacob listened carefully. Trust, he knew, could not be demanded. It had to be earned. Bays. He gave them space, but stayed close, keeping an eye on the cave entrance. The desert was quiet at night, but it could hide dangers as easily as it could protect them. After a moment, another woman spoke, her voice trembling.
"They said we stole cattle."
"But it is not true. We never stole anything." Jacob nodded. "I can see that. I watched how you carried yourselves. You are not thieves." Naeli took a deep breath. "It is Silas Thorne. He is a rich man in the town. He wants our land. Our people have lived there for generations. We refused to give it up, so he framed us. The sheriff, he only does what Silas wants." Jacob frowned. He had suspected as much when he saw the man watching the hanging. Greed often wore a friendly face, and Silas Thorne seemed to have perfected it. How did he think this would work? Jacob asked. "They said we were criminals," Naeli said bitterly. "The townspeople believed them. Some were scared, Some wanted to see us punished, but we did nothing wrong. We only tried to protect our land." Jacob felt a surge of anger, but he controlled it. Anger without a plan was dangerous in the desert. Then we need to be smart. They will come after you. Silas won't stop until he gets what he wants. We need a place to hide and a way to fight back. The women looked at him, hope and fear mixing in their expressions. One of the younger women whispered, "Can we really fight back? He has money, power, and men who will do anything for him."
Jacob shook his head slowly. "It is not about fighting with guns or money. It is about using what you have."
Knowledge, courage, and truth can be stronger than fear and power. But we must be careful. One mistake and they could find us. For the next hours, they spoke quietly, sharing their stories. Naeli told Jacob about their families, the land, and the traditions they had kept alive despite the encroachment of settlers. The land was not just property, it was home, a place with sacred meaning and memories. The women described how Silas had tried to buy their land at low prices and how they had refused. That refusal had made him furious, leading to this terrible plot. Jacob listened closely. Every word they spoke helped him understand the situation better. Began to see the bigger picture. Silas was not only greedy but clever. He used fear, bribery, and the law to get what he wanted. And the women had been his first victims, accused of theft to remove obstacles quietly. "We need proof," Jacob said finally. "We need something that shows the sheriff and the townspeople who Silas really is. Otherwise, this will never end." The women nodded. "We know where he keeps his documents," Naeli said. "In his office. But no one can go there without being seen. He has guards and hired men everywhere." Jacob smiled slightly. "Then we will be clever. Pay. We don't need to rush. We will watch, wait, and learn. Timing is everything in situations like this." Over the next few days, Jacob led the women carefully through the desert paths that wound around the town. They moved mostly at night, hiding by day, eating small portions of dried meat and bread Jacob had carried. He taught them to notice signs of tracking and to stay alert for anyone who might be following them. The women, though frightened at first, grew stronger with each passing day. First, during their journey, Jacob discovered more about the women. There was Ahioka, a quiet young woman with quick hands and sharp eyes, who could climb rocks and move silently. Taya, taller and stronger, who often carried the heavier supplies. Luyu, clever and observant, who noticed details others missed. And the others each had skills that could help them survive. Jacob realized that together they were more capable than any one man alone. They found small shelters and rocky outcroppings during the day, and at night they continued moving, careful not to leave obvious tracks. Jacob kept watch while the women rested, listening for sounds of pursuit. Once, he heard distant voices and quickly signaled for silence. They lay flat among the rocks until the men passed, but it was tense. But the women began to trust Jacob's instincts. One night, as they rested near a dry stream bed, Jacob spoke about the next steps.
"We need evidence that Silas is stealing land. If we can show the truth, it will stop him."
"But we have to be smart. If we act too soon, we risk everything." Hioka tilted her head.
How do we get it? His documents are locked away.
And the guards. Jacob nodded.
"We will find a way."
Every man has weaknesses, and Silas's pride is one of them. He believes no one can stop him. Beth, that will be our advantage. We just need to watch, learn, and wait for the right moment. Burris. The women listened carefully. They had been powerless before, but Jacob's words gave them hope. They realized that escaping the hanging was only the beginning. Now, they had a chance to fight, not with guns or swords, but with courage, intelligence, and truth. As they traveled, Jacob also taught the women survival skills. How to find water, how to identify dangerous animals, how to make temporary shelters. He showed them how to move quietly and blend with the landscape. It was hard work, but the women learned quickly. Each lesson was a step toward independence, a step away from the fear that had haunted them in the town. By the 5th night, they had reached a hidden plateau overlooking the town. From this vantage point, Jacob could see Silas's ranch and the town beyond. The women gasped at the view, realizing how close danger still was. Jacob explained that they could watch the movements of Silas and his men from here, planning their next move carefully.
Bet.
Nayeli spoke softly. "We never thought anyone would help us. You
risked your life to save us." Jacob shook his head. "It was the right thing to do. But saving you was only the first step. We must be smart now." The fight for justice is just beginning. They settled near the plateau, keeping low and using the rocks for cover. That night, Jacob watched the town lights twinkle below while the women rested. He knew Silas would soon notice the missing women, and he would send men to search. They needed a plan before that happened. Jacob also reflected on the women themselves. Each had courage, but each had fear, too. He realized that helping them escape was only the start. They would need guidance, confidence, and support to survive and reclaim what was theirs. Bess. He made a mental map of the next steps, gathering evidence, finding allies, and exposing Silas. The desert night was calm, but Jacob could feel tension in the air. The quiet was temporary. Soon, Silas would act. But for now, they rested. The women shared small stories of their lives, memories of home and traditions that Silas wanted to erase. They laughed softly at small jokes, tears mingling with smiles. Jacob smiled quietly. Even in fear they found strength. Even in danger they found hope. This was why he had risked everything for them. It was not just a rescue, it was a chance to set right a terrible wrong, to stand against greed and corruption. Fast. As dawn broke, painting the desert in pink and gold, Jacob prepared for the next stage of their journey. They would need courage, patience, and cleverness. But he believed that together they could face whatever came next. The women were no longer victims. They were survivors, and soon they would be fighters in their own right. The day had begun, and the fight for truth, justice in their land was only starting. Jacob knew it would not be easy, but he also knew that some things were worth risking everything for, and these women, brave and strong, were worth it. Jacob and the women stayed hidden on the plateau, keeping a careful watch over the town below. From this high vantage point they could see the movements at Silas Thorne's ranch. Smoke rose from the chimneys, and the clatter of horses echoed across the open yard. Silas had already noticed the women's disappearance. Jacob could see the sheriff pacing, speaking quietly to men who looked tense and alert. It was clear that their absence had caused suspicion, but the truth about Silas's greed had not yet been discovered. Jacob turned to Nayeli and the others.
We have to be careful. Silas will be sending men to find you.
Proof of what he is doing. Without it, we cannot stop him. Yoka, always the sharp-eyed one, squinted toward the ranch. I think we can get close. Psst. There's a storage shed behind the main house. I saw it from here yesterday. That is probably where he keeps papers and documents. Jacob nodded. Good observation. But we cannot rush. We need a plan. We will move at night, when the guards are fewer and the shadows cover us. Psst. Timing is everything. The group spent the day observing the ranch from the plateau, noting patterns. They saw men leaving for errands, horses being fed, and guards patrolling certain paths. Luyu, clever and alert, pointed out a small side entrance that rarely had anyone. We could use that, she said softly. It is far from the main gate, and I don't see anyone watching it closely. Jacob agreed. That is our way in. We will wait until nightfall, then move quietly. Each of you must be ready. This will be dangerous, but it is the only way to get the proof we need. Night came, deep and quiet. The desert was cooler now, and the stars sparkled brightly overhead. Jacob led the women down a winding path that blended with the natural curves of the rocks. Every step was careful and deliberate. They avoided open areas and moved where shadows offered cover. The women had learned well. They moved silently, communicating with gestures and whispers. As they approached the side entrance to the ranch, Jacob signaled them to stop. We are close. Remember, we are looking for documents, letters, anything that shows Silas is stealing land. Be patient, bears. Move slowly. Hioka took the lead, climbing over a low fence with grace and balance. Pharaoh. She signaled that the coast was clear. One by one, the others followed. Jacob stayed at the rear, keeping watch for any unexpected movement. They slipped into the shadows behind the main building, hearts pounding with tension, pissed. Inside the shed, they found boxes filled with papers. Jacob carefully sifted through them, revealing contracts, forged deeds, and letters between Silas and the sheriff. Back. Some letters contained threats, others bribery. Bay. It became clear that Silas had manipulated the law to claim the Apache land, using false accusations to remove anyone who resisted him. "This is it," Jacob whispered, holding up a stack of documents. "This is proof. We need to get this to someone who can act on it. The townspeople, the higher authorities, someone who can stop him." Suddenly, footsteps approached. One of Silas's men was returning to check the shed. Jacob froze, signaling the women to hide behind crates. The man entered, muttering to himself, and began stacking more papers. The women held their breath, barely daring to blink. Bay. After what felt like an eternity, the man left. Jacob exhaled quietly. "Biss. We cannot stay long. We have the documents. Biss." They retraced their steps carefully, returning to the plateau where they had hidden their horses. The documents were secured, and the women were silent, processing the danger they had just faced. The risk had been high, but the reward was worth it. They now had undeniable proof of Silas's crimes. For the next few days, Jacob and the women planned their next move. They could not simply walk into town with the evidence. Bay. Silas's influence ran deep. The sheriff and other officials were likely compromised. They needed allies who could help present the truth safely. Jacob remembered a friend in a nearby town, a lawman named Marshall Green, known for his honesty and bravery. "We will take these documents to him," Jacob explained. "He can help us bring Silas to justice. But the journey will be dangerous. We must stay hidden and travel carefully." The women nodded, understanding the importance of caution. Nayeli spoke softly. "We are ready. We will do whatever is necessary." Their journey to the next town was slow and careful. They avoided main roads and traveled by night. During the day, they hid in rocky outcrops, small caves, and brush. Jacob taught the women how to recognize tracks that did not belong to them, how to spot potential ambushes, and how to move silently over sand and rock. One evening, as they rested near a dry riverbed, they noticed signs that they were being followed. Footprints in the sand matched the boots of Silas's men. Jacob immediately signaled for silence. They hid among the rocks, waiting. The men passed by, unaware that the group had seen them. "That was close," Liu Yu whispered. "They're getting smarter, watching for us." Jacob nodded, but we are smarter.
We have a plan, and we have evidence. We just need to stay alive long enough to deliver it.
Then Silas will have no choice but to face justice. During this journey, the women shared more about their lives and their land. They spoke of sacred spots, hidden springs, and places where their ancestors had lived for generations. Jacob listened carefully, realizing that what Silas wanted was not just property, it was heritage. This made the mission even more important. Finally, after several nights of careful travel, they reached the outskirts of the neighboring town. Marshall Green's office was in sight, and Jacob felt a sense of cautious relief. He knocked on the door quietly, and a tall man with a stern face and a kind expression opened it. "Jacob McAllister?" the man asked. "Yes," Jacob replied. "I need your help. This is important." Lives are at stake. Marshall Green's eyes narrowed as Jacob handed over the documents. He examined them carefully, reading letters, contracts, and deeds. His expression shifted from curiosity to anger. This is serious, he said finally. If this is true, Silas Thorne has been committing fraud and corruption for years. These women, they were framed. We must act immediately.
Jacob nodded. That is why I brought them here. They are the victims.
We need protection, and we need the law on our side before Silas can react. Brr. Marshal Green agreed, arranging for the women to be safely housed while he planned the legal action against Silas.
Jacob watched as the women were escorted into a secure place.
Pang. Their faces were still anxious, but now there was hope. For the first time since the hanging, they felt safe, knowing that someone powerful and honest was on their side. Jacob stayed with them for a moment, speaking quietly. This is only the beginning. Silas will not go down without trying to fight. But now, we have evidence. Now we have a chance to see justice done. The women nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. They had survived capture, escape, and danger in the desert. Now they would see that survival could turn into justice. As night fell, Jacob looked toward the distant town, knowing that Silas would soon discover the disappearance of his documents. He had no doubt that men would be sent to find the women and stop the law from acting, but Jacob also knew that careful planning, courage, and truth would outlast greed and corruption. The fire in their small camp burned quietly, reflecting hope in the women's faces. They had faced fear, and now they faced a new kind of challenge, ensuring the truth reached the right people. With Jacob's guidance and their own courage, they were ready. The desert around them was silent, but the wind carried a sense of change. A plan was in motion, and soon, Silas Thorne's scheme would be exposed. Jacob felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. They had risked much, but the fight for justice had begun, and he believed that they could win. The women slept safely that night under the protection of Marshal Green's careful watch. Jacob remained outside, keeping a lookout, thinking through the next steps. He knew Silas would not give up easily, and the battle to reclaim the women's land was far from over. But for now, they had evidence, allies, and hope, a combination that could not be ignored. Jacob spent the next few days planning carefully. The documents they had taken from Silas Thorne's shed were in safe hands with Marshal Green, but Jacob knew the final step would be the most dangerous. The rancher had power, wealth, and men ready to do his bidding. If they made a mistake, the women could be captured again, and the chance for justice would vanish. He gathered the women in a quiet room near the town. Their eyes were alert, and each face carried determination. "We cannot rush into this," Jacob said firmly. "Silas is dangerous, and his men are loyal to him, but we know his secrets. We have evidence. Tonight, we act, but carefully. We will confront him, and we will make sure the law sees what he has done." The women nodded. Naeli, the eldest, spoke softly. "We are ready."
We trust you, Jacob. We will follow your lead.
Jacob felt a surge of respect and responsibility. He knew that the women's trust was not given lightly, and he would not let them down. He explained the plan once more. They would approach the ranch at night, using a hidden path Jacob had discovered while observing. Some of the women would create a distraction, while others, with Jacob, would enter the main house and gather additional evidence. As night fell, the desert grew quiet. Stars glittered overhead, and a gentle wind swept across the plateau where they had gathered. Jacob led the women through a winding path that avoided the main road and any possible patrols. They moved slowly, carefully, speaking only in whispers. Their shadows blended with the rocks and low brush. Every step was deliberate,
Ahioka led the way, nimble and alert, scouting the path ahead. Luyu and Taya followed, carrying small bags with tools and supplies.
Nayeli and the other women stayed close to Jacob.
Ah!
They reached the edge of Silas Thorne's property and paused to survey the area. The ranch lay below, dimly lit by lanterns, and the men patrolling the perimeter moved predictably. Bah. Jacob whispered, "Stay low. Follow my lead." We move together, but no one takes unnecessary risks. They approach the side of the ranch, moving like shadows across the ground. Ahioka climbed over a fence, signaling the others to follow. Once inside the property, they moved quietly behind the buildings, keeping to the darkness. Jacob led the women to the shed where the previous documents had been stored, checking that it was empty. Then he noticed a small door leading to the main house. "This is it," he said quietly.
We need to find more proof.
There may be letters, contracts, or ledgers that show exactly how Silas has been stealing the land. Be careful. We do not know if anyone is inside. Ahioka nodded, opening the door slowly. They slipped inside, moving quietly through the shadows. The house smelled of wood and dust, and the faint light of oil lamps barely lit the rooms. Jacob motioned to the women to search carefully, taking only what could serve as evidence. They found letters, contracts, and even a ledger with names of settlers who had been paid to support Silas's scheme. Suddenly, a door creaked. One of Silas's men had returned unexpectedly. Jacob froze, signaling the women to hide behind furniture. The man entered the room, grumbling, and began organizing papers. The women held their breath. Jacob slowly moved closer to a window, planning an escape route. After what seemed like forever, the man left, unaware that anyone had been there. Jacob exhaled quietly. We have what we need. Let's go before anyone else comes. They retraced their steps carefully, moving toward the side exit. But just as they were about to leave, a lantern lit up nearby, and a shadow appeared. Silas himself, tall and imposing, had noticed movement near his house. He shouted orders to his men, and a tense moment followed as they searched for the intruders. Jacob quickly signaled the women to scatter into the shadows. Using his knowledge of the terrain, he led them through narrow paths and behind buildings, keeping low and moving silently. The sound of shouting men faded as they disappeared into the desert night. Once they were at a safe distance, Jacob gathered the women. "That was close," he said, "but we have what we came for. Now it's time for the law to act." The next day, Marshal Green and a few honest deputies arrived at the ranch with the evidence. They confronted Silas Thorne with contracts, forged deeds, and letters proving his illegal actions. Silas tried to deny everything, but the proof was undeniable. The lawmen arrested him, and the sheriff, who had followed Silas's orders, was forced to cooperate under threat of his own arrest. Jacob watched as Silas was taken away, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction.
The women, standing beside him, showed cautious smiles. They were free, and the land that had been threatened was now protected.
The townspeople began to realize the truth about Silas and his greed. Some were ashamed for believing his lies, while others expressed relief that justice had been done. That evening, Jacob and the women returned to the plateau near the desert. They watched the sunset together, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in weeks, they felt safe. The wind whispered through the rocks, and the quiet of the desert brought a sense of calm. Bang.
Nayeli spoke softly. "You saved us, Jacob, not just from the noose, but from losing everything we love."
We cannot thank you enough. Jacob smiled. You have the courage, the strength, and the knowledge to protect yourselves. I only helped you see it. The women laughed softly, a sound full of relief and joy. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and now they were free. But Jacob knew that life in the frontier was never simple. Challenges would come again, but for now, justice had been served. As night fell, Jacob looked at the stars, thinking about the journey they had taken. From the town square where the women had been tied to posts, through the desert and the hidden paths, to the confrontation at Silas's ranch. It had been a journey of courage, intelligence, and hope. The women settled down for the night, feeling the security of being alive and free. Jacob stayed awake for a while, keeping watch, reflecting on the bravery they had shown. Each woman had grown stronger, more confident, and more determined to protect what was theirs. By dawn, the desert glowed with soft light. Jacob knew that Silas Thorne's influence had been broken, at least for now. The women could return to their land safely, and the town would remember the courage it had taken to stand up to greed and corruption. Jacob felt a quiet satisfaction. He had risked his life, faced danger, and led these women to freedom, but more importantly, he had helped restore justice. The fight had been hard, the danger real, but the result was worth every risk. The story of courage, determination, and justice would not be forgotten. And as Jacob rode into the desert, leaving the women to rebuild their lives safely, he knew that sometimes one person's courage could change the course of many lives. The desert stretched endlessly before him, calm and quiet, but full of promise. Jacob had saved lives, exposed corruption, and given hope. And for now, that was enough. After Silas Thorne was arrested, the town slowly began to change. The fear and tension that had hung over the people like a heavy cloud started to lift. Jacob rode into town with the women, but they stayed in the background, letting the authorities handle Silas's trial. The lawmen, guided by Marshal Green, worked carefully to ensure everything was fair. The documents Jacob and the woman had collected were presented as evidence, leaving no room for doubt about Silas's guilt. The townspeople watched as the trial unfolded. Many of them had been quiet witnesses to Silas's schemes, afraid to speak up. Now, faced with undeniable proof, they began to speak the truth. Witnesses confirmed the bribes, the forged deeds, and the threats. The judge, a stern but fair man, listened carefully, ensuring justice would be done.
Jacob stayed close to the women during the trial, quietly explaining the process. Patience is important, he told them.
Truth is stronger than fear. We have done the hard part. Now we let justice do the rest.
Nayeli nodded, her face serious but calm.
We have been through so much, but finally, there is hope.
The trial lasted for several days.
Silas tried to deny everything, claiming the documents were false and that the women had lied. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged deeds, letters, and ledgers all pointed to a single truth. He had manipulated the law, bribed officials, and tried to take land that did not belong to him. The judge ruled in favor of the women and the Apache community, nullifying the fraudulent deeds and restoring the land to its rightful owners. When the trial was over, the women stepped outside the courthouse. They breathed deeply, feeling the warm sunlight on their faces. It was the first time in weeks they had felt completely free. They hugged each other, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Jacob stood nearby, quietly smiling. Bah. He had guided them through danger, helped them gather proof, and ensured they would see justice. Now they could begin to rebuild their lives. The women returned to their land, walking carefully through the familiar paths of their home. The desert, the hills, and the streams felt different now, freer, safer, and filled with possibility. Jacob accompanied them for the first part of the journey, helping them inspect the land, checking that everything was in order.
"This is yours," Jacob said softly, looking at the rolling hills and fertile valleys.
You fought for it, and now it is yours to protect. Nayeli smiled. We could not have done it without you. You saved our lives and helped us reclaim what is rightfully ours.
Jacob shook his head. You saved yourselves.
I only helped guide you. Courage like yours cannot be given. It must come from within. But the women began working to restore their land. They repaired fences, cleared fields, and prepared areas for planting. Even after the danger had passed, they worked hard, knowing that their survival depended on both protection and preparation. Jacob stayed nearby for a few days, helping when needed, but mostly allowing them to take control of their lives again.
During this time, the women shared their stories with neighboring communities. They explained how Silas had tried to cheat them, and how courage, intelligence, and perseverance had allowed them to protect their land.
The story inspired others, and Jacob's quiet bravery became known in nearby towns. People began to see that standing up against corruption, even in the face of danger, could bring justice. Jacob knew that his work with the women was complete. The land was safe. The town's officials were aware of Silas's corruption, and the women were capable of protecting themselves. It was time to move on. One morning he saddled his horse and approached the women. I must leave now, he said. Your land is safe, and the law has acted. Despot. You are stronger than ever, and your courage will guide you from here. Nayeli and the others looked at him with gratitude. We will never forget you, Jacob, she said. You risked everything to help us. Thank you. Jacob smiled faintly. I do not need thanks. Seeing you safe and free is enough.
He mounted his horse and rode away slowly, the morning sun casting long shadows across the land.
The women watched him go, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. He had been their protector, their guide, and their ally. Now they were ready to continue without him. As the days passed, the women settled fully into their land. They rebuilt homes, cultivated fields, and tended to livestock. Their community grew stronger, united by the shared experience of danger and survival. They honored their traditions and ensured that the memory of the struggle would be passed on to future generations. Jacob continued his travels across the frontier, helping where he could, always moving quietly and keeping to the edges of towns. But he carried with him the memory of the 7 women he had saved and the justice they had achieved together. It reminded him why he rode alone and why courage, integrity, and careful planning were the most important tools anyone could have in a world filled with danger and greed. Word of Silas Thorne's arrest and the women's bravery spread throughout the region.
Other settlers and community leaders began to question corrupt officials and unfair land deals.
Slowly, the frontier towns began to see a change in how justice was applied. People understood that courage and honesty mattered, and that even one person could make a difference if they were willing to act. The women often looked toward the horizon, remembering Jacob and the long nights of planning, hiding, and escaping danger. They felt gratitude not only for his bravery, but for the lessons he had taught them about patience, intelligence, and courage. They knew that the fight for justice was never easy, but their experience had shown them that it was possible. Seasons passed, and the land flourished under the care of the women. The streams ran clear, the fields grew rich, and their community thrived. Their story became a legend in the region, a tale of survival, courage, and the triumph of truth over greed. Travelers who passed through their land were told of how one man, a cowboy, had saved them from injustice and helped them reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Jacob, far away on another journey, heard rumors of the women's success. He smiled quietly to himself, knowing that they had grown stronger and that justice had been served. It was a reminder of why he had chosen the path of courage and why he continued to roam the frontier, helping those in need and standing against corruption wherever he found it. Though the story had reached its conclusion for the women, it was only one chapter in the long and unpredictable life of the frontier. Jacob's journey would continue, and others would face challenges that required bravery, intelligence, and persistence. But for now, the 7 women were free, their land restored, and their lives renewed. The desert stretched wide and quiet, holding memories of danger and triumph. The sun rose and set over the land, marking the passage of time and the enduring spirit of those who had fought for what was right. The women, stronger and wiser than before, stood together, looking forward to the future with hope. They had survived. They had reclaimed their home, and they had learned the power of courage and determination. Jacob's presence had been brief, but life-changing. He had risked his safety to help them, guided them through danger, and ensured that justice prevailed. The lessons of survival, courage, and careful planning stayed with the women, shaping the way they rebuilt their lives and protected their land. And though Jacob was gone, his legacy remained, carried in the hearts of those he had saved. The desert was calm again, but it had been forever changed by the bravery and courage of one cowboy and 7 women who refused to be defeated. The story ended not with violence or revenge, but with justice, hope, and new beginnings. The women had survived, their land was safe, and the frontier had seen that courage and truth could overcome greed and corruption. And somewhere in the distance, Jacob rode on, ready for the next adventure, knowing that his actions had made a difference in the lives of those who needed it most.